Summer of 1971 sat heavy and hot over the small town of Beaumont, Texas. The air smelled of cut grass and dust, and the streets baked under a relentless sun. On the edge of town, in a sagging two-room house with a leaking roof and a broken front step, lived a boy named Leroy James Washington. Leroy was 10 years old, thin as a broomstick, with big dark eyes that noticed everything. He noticed the way the white families on Maple Drive had wide green lawns and 2 cars. He noticed the way their houses stood tall and proud, with freshly painted walls and glass windows that sparkled in the morning light. And he noticed most of all the way his own family moved. They moved a lot. His father, Earl Washington, was a strong man with tired hands. He worked wherever work could be found. At the cotton gin, the steel yard, the loading docks. His mother, Clara, cleaned houses for wealthier families and took in laundry to make extra money. Together, they worked from before sunrise to long after dark, and still, it was never quite enough. Every few months, the landlord would come knocking, and every few months, the Washingtons would pack their few belongings into cardboard boxes and find somewhere else to stay. 3 times in 1971 alone, Leroy had changed schools, changed streets, changed everything, except his name and his hunger. One evening, as the family sat on the porch of their latest rented room eating beans and cornbread, Leroy looked out at the distant skyline. A tall building was going up across town, cranes swinging, steel beams rising. "Who builds those?" Leroy asked his father. Earl smiled tiredly. "Real estate men, son. Men with land, men with buildings." Leroy looked at that rising building for a long time. "Then that's what I'm going to be," he said quietly. "I'm going to own buildings, so we never have to move again?" Earl and Clara exchanged a glance. They did not laugh. They had learned long ago never to laugh at a dreaming child. The years passed. Leroy grew taller and sharper. He read every book he could find. He asked his teachers questions until they ran out of answers. At school, some boys mocked him for wearing worn-out shoes and carrying a second-hand bag. Leroy said nothing. He kept his head down and kept studying. By the time he was 14, he had read 3 books on American land ownership from the public library. He had a notebook where he wrote down everything: prices of land, names of developers, newspaper clippings about real estate. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, once held up his notebook in class and said, "This boy has a plan. The rest of you had better find one too." But life had other plans first. In the spring of 1975, everything changed in a single night. Earl and Clara were coming home from a double shift. It was past midnight on Route 9. A drunk driver ran a red light. The accident happened fast. Too fast for anyone to stop it. Leroy was 14 years old when the policeman came to the door. He stood there in his thin pajamas in the cold night air and felt something inside him go very still. Not broken, just still. Like the world had stopped turning and was waiting to see what he would do next. He cried. Of course he cried. He cried for 3 days straight. But on the 4th day, he picked up his notebook. He opened it to the first page where, in his young handwriting, he had written, "One day I will own buildings, so we never have to move again." He crossed out "we" and wrote "they," meaning his parents' memory. Then he closed the notebook, put it in his bag, and went to find his grandmother. Grandma Rose Washington was 71 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall, and tougher than boot leather. She lived in a small, neat house on Cypress Street. It wasn't much, but it was hers, paid off 40 years ago by her late husband, who had saved every penny he earned as a railroad worker. "You're going to live here now," she said simply when Leroy arrived with his cardboard box. "And you're going to school every single day. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now put your things down and come eat." Grandma Rose's house was small, but her belief in Leroy was enormous. She never spoke of giving up. She never allowed the word "can't" at her table. But she also could not afford to send Leroy to college. That was a mountain they would have to climb together. So Leroy worked. He woke at 5 every morning and delivered newspapers before school. After school, he washed dishes at a diner on 5th Street. On weekends, he mowed lawns, fixed fences, and carried groceries for the elderly neighbors on Cypress Street. He saved every dollar, every single one. There were nights when he was so tired he fell asleep at the kitchen table with his face in his textbook. Grandma Rose would come and drape a blanket over his shoulders without waking him. In the morning, he would wake up, fold the blanket neatly, and begin again. Some days were crushing. Once his bicycle, his only way to deliver papers, was stolen. He ran the whole route on foot, 2 hours in the rain, and delivered every single paper. He came home soaked, shivering, and bleeding from where his shoe had rubbed his heel raw. "Why didn't you just skip it?" a friend asked. "Because they paid me to do a job," Leroy said simply, "and I don't do half jobs." That was Leroy. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, like a river that knows where it is going and does not stop to ask permission. By 1979, Leroy had saved enough with the help of a small scholarship to enroll at Houston Community College. He studied business and real estate. He worked nights at a gas station to pay his way. He slept 5 hours a night and never once complained. His professors noticed him. One of them, a man named Professor Hall, pulled him aside one day after class. "Washington, I have been teaching for 20 years, he said, "and I can tell you something. You're not the smartest student I've had, but you are the most disciplined, and in real life, discipline beats talent almost every single time." Leroy never forgot those words. He graduated in 1981 with a degree in business administration. He was 20 years old, had $22 in his pocket, and a dream the size of Texas. He started small, a rundown duplex in a poor neighborhood, bought with a bank loan he had to beg for 3 times before anyone said yes. He repaired it himself, learning plumbing, painting, and carpentry from library books and YouTube videos that didn't yet exist, but from real men on job sites who took pity on the skinny, determined young man who asked good questions and worked hard without being asked twice. He rented the duplex. Then he bought another property, then another. Each one a little bigger, each one a little better. He plowed every cent of profit back into the next project. He lived lean, drove an old truck, and wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. People laughed behind his back. He let them laugh. He was busy building. It was the winter of 1979, December, cold and still. Leroy sat alone in his small apartment, looking at a letter he had received that morning. It was from the Texas Real Estate Association. He had been nominated for Real Estate Mogul of the Year. He sat with the letter for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Grandma Rose. "Grandma," he said, "you remember when I was 10 and I told Daddy I was going to own buildings someday?" "I remember," she said. "I was sitting right there on that porch." "Well," he said quietly, "I built 47 of them." There was a long silence on the line, and then the sound of an old woman weeping, not in sadness, but in the pure, overwhelming joy of watching a seed she had watered in the dark finally bloom in the light. The ballroom of the Houston Grand Hotel was filled with the most powerful names in Texas real estate. Men in fine suits, women in elegant dresses, chandeliers throwing gold light across the ceiling. On the stage, a plaque waited, engraved with the words, "Texas Real Estate Mogul of the Year." When they called Leroy Washington's name, the room applauded. He walked to the podium, a tall man now, broad-shouldered, calm-eyed. He looked out at the crowd, and then he began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady and warm, "I did not grow up in a house like this. I grew up in rented rooms with leaking roofs. My family was sacked from one place to the next, never sure where we would sleep the following month. My parents worked themselves to the bone trying to give me a stable life. They didn't always succeed, but they never ever stopped trying. When I was 14 years old, they were taken from me, and I had a choice. I could give up. I could decide that the world was cruel and unfair, and it was, and let that be my reason to stop. Or I could pick up my notebook and keep going. I chose to keep going." People talk about success like it is a gift. It is not. It is a construction project, and every single day you show up and you lay one more brick. Some days the bricks are heavy, Some days it rains and the mortar won't set. Some days someone kicks over what you just built. But you show up the next morning and you lay another brick. Discipline is not glamorous. It is waking up when you are tired. It is doing the work when no one is watching. It is saying no to shortcuts because you know that cheap foundations crack. Hard work is not punishment. It is the price of a life you can be proud of. And the never give up attitude? That is not stubbornness. That is faith. Faith that your dream is bigger than your setback. Faith that what your parents sacrificed for you deserves to be honored. Faith that the boy delivering newspapers in the rain at 5 in the morning will one day stand on a stage like this. My mother and father never saw a house with their own name on the deed. But tonight, I dedicate every single building I have ever built to them. And to my grandmother Rose, who is 85 years old and sitting right there in the front row. He paused, his voice caught just for a moment. Who never once let me believe that where I came from was where I had to stay. The room was silent for 3 full seconds, and then it erupted. Standing ovation. Every single person on their feet. In the front row, a small old woman with bright eyes pressed a handkerchief to her face and smiled the smile of someone who had always known this moment was coming. Leroy James Washington went on to build over 200 homes and residential complexes across Texas, many of them in the same poor neighborhoods where he once lived. He established the Earl and Clara Washington Scholarship Fund, named after his parents, which helped over 300 young people from low-income families attend college. He never forgot the leaking roof. He never forgot the cardboard boxes. He never forgot the notebook. And every year, on the anniversary of his parents' passing, he would sit on the porch of his grandmother's little house on Cypress Street, still standing, freshly painted now with his money in his hands, and look up at the buildings on the skyline. Buildings that bore witness to one truth: a dream, properly protected by discipline and hard work, cannot be killed. Not by poverty, not by loss, not by any storm this world can send.